Hey guys, I'm trying to hit 100k by the end of the year, and I think we can get there with your help, so please subscribe. It would honestly mean a lot to me personally. I love seeing you guys subscribing. Thank you guys so much. It warms my heart, bro. But anyways, today I wanted to read some more Reddit stories for you. These are some uncanny ones, so let's get straight into this. Follow my Instagram, join my Discord, and yeah, first story, here we come. I got stuck in a time loop in my high-rise, and now I can't escape my own nightmare. You know that feeling when you're alone in an elevator and it stops between floors for just a second too long? That's how my life feels now. Suspended, uncertain, waiting for the other shoe to drop. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. My name's Alex Chin. I'm 32, work in software development, and up until 6 months ago, I thought I had it all figured out. Great job, beautiful girlfriend, and a cozy apartment in the suburbs. The American dream, right? Wrong. It all fell apart on a rainy Tuesday in April. I came home early thinking I'd surprise Sarah with dinner. Instead, I found her in our bed with my best friend Tom. Cliche, I know, but it hurt like hell. "What the hell, Sarah?" I remember shouting, my voice cracking. Sarah scrambled to cover herself, her face a mix of shock and guilt. "Alex, I can explain." Tom, that bastard, just sat there, looking like a deer in headlights. Explain? Explain what?" I spat. "How you're with my best friend in our bed? Jesus Christ." The next few weeks were a blur of arguments, tears, and dividing up our life together. Who gets the coffee maker? What about the cat? In the end, I left with a suitcase of clothes, my laptop, and a broken heart. I threw myself into work, spending long nights coding and debugging. My boss, Janet, noticed. "Alex, you look like crap," she said one Friday afternoon. Her blunt honesty, one of the reasons I respected her. "When's the last time you slept in a real bed?" I shrugged, avoiding her gaze. "The couch at my buddy Mike's place isn't that bad." Janet sighed, tossing a glossy brochure on my desk. "My sister's a realtor. She's got a client offering a crazy deal on apartments in Skyline Towers. It's that new high-rise downtown. Why don't you check it out?" I started to protest, but Janet cut me off. "It's not a request, Alex. Take the weekend, find a place, and come back Monday looking less like a zombie. Got it?" That's how I ended up on the 37th floor of Skyline Towers, surrounded by sleek appliances and floor-to-ceiling windows that made me feel like I was floating above the city. "So, what do you think?" The realtor, a perky blonde named Melissa, was practically bouncing with enthusiasm. I ran my hand along the smooth granite countertop. "It's nice, but I don't know if it's really me." Melissa's smile never wavered. "Oh, trust me, it's perfect for you. A fresh start, right? New place, new you." Something in her tone made me pause. It was too eager, too insistent. But then she mentioned the discounted rent. Apparently, the building owners were desperate to fill the units, and I found myself signing the lease. The first few months were adjustment. I'd never lived in a high-rise before. The constant hum of the city below, the way the building swayed slightly on windy days, it all took some getting used to. But I started to settle in. I met some of my neighbors, Mrs. Paddle in 704, always ready with a plate of homemade samosas and neighborhood gossip. Mr. Grayson from 708, a gruff retiree who loved to reminisce about the good old days, and Dave from 701, a fellow tech guy who quickly became my go-to for beers and video games. Work improved too. I started a new project, an AI-driven system for predicting power grid failures. The irony of that doesn't escape me now. It was a Tuesday night in October when everything changed. I was working late, eyes burning from staring at lines of code for hours. The glare of my monitors was the only light in the apartment. I'd grown to like the way the city lights painted patterns on my walls. A notification popped up on my phone. Severe thunderstorm warning for the downtown area. Potential for power outages. I glanced out the window. The sky was angry, roiling clouds illuminated by flashes of lightning. I should have felt something then. Fear, apprehension, anything. But all I felt was mild annoyance to the thought of losing Wi-Fi. How naive I was. The storm hit with a fury I'd never seen before. Rain lashed against the windows like it was trying to break in. Thunder rattled the building to its foundations. And then, at exactly 11:58 p.m., the lights went out. Not just in my apartment, not just in the building. As I pressed my face against the cool glass, I watched in awe as the entire city went dark, block by block, like a great beast closing its eyes. For a moment, there was absolute silence. No hum of electronics, no distant traffic noise, nothing. Then, Somewhere in the building, someone screamed, and that's when the real nightmare began. The scream echoed through the building, sending chills down my spine. For a moment, I stood frozen, unsure what to do. Then my instincts kicked in, and I fumbled for my phone's flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating a small circle of my living room. Outside, the storm raged on, lightning occasionally casting grotesque shadows across the walls. A pounding on my door made me jump. Alex, you okay in there?" It was Dave's voice, tight with panic. I opened the door to find him standing there, wild-eyed and panting. "Did you hear that scream?" he asked. I nodded, my mouth dry. "Yeah, what the hell's going on?" "I don't know, man. The whole building's out, the whole damn city from what I can see." We decided to check on our neighbors. The hallway was pitch black, our phone lights barely cutting through the gloom. Mrs. Paddle was fine, just spooked. Mr. Grayson grumbled about shoddy modern infrastructure, but when we reached 706, we found the door slightly ajar. "Hello?" I called out, pushing the door open wider. "Everyone okay in here?" The beam of my flashlight swept across the room and I froze. There, sprawled on the floor, was a body. I recognized him vaguely. Johnson, I think his name was. He'd only moved in last week. "Oh crap," Dave whispered behind me. "Is he..." I knelt down, fingers trembling as I felt for a pulse. Nothing. The rest of the night was a blur of police sirens, paramedics, and questions I couldn't answer. By the time dawn broke, casting an eerie gray light over the powerless city, I was exhausted. I collapsed into bed, my head spinning with the events of the night. I must have drifted off to sleep because the next thing I knew, I was waking up to the sound of my alarm. 11:58 p.m., Tuesday night. I sat bolt upright, heart pounding. That couldn't be right. I fumbled for my phone, but it showed the same time. What the hell's going on? Then the lights went out. I ran to the window, watching in horror as the city went dark, just like before. The storm, the blackout, it was all happening again. A knock at my door. Dave, looking panicked. "Alex, did you hear that scream?" My blood ran cold. This couldn't be happening. It was impossible. But as we made our way down the hall, checking on neighbors, a sick feeling grew in my stomach. Everything was the same. Mrs. Paddle, spooked but fine. Mr. Grayson, grumbling. And then 706. I braced myself, expecting to see Johnson's body again. But the apartment was empty. No body, no sign of struggle, nothing. "I don't understand," I muttered, more to myself than to Dave. Then we heard another scream, this time from 712. We rushed over and my heart sank. There, lying in the kitchen floor, was Mrs. Thompson, dead. The loop reset itself again, and again. Each time, a new victim in a different apartment, the previous deaths erased as if they'd never happened. Loop number 3, Mr. Grayson in 708. Loop number 4, the college kid from 701. Loop number 5, Mrs. Paddle in 704. I started keeping obsessive track. Skyline has 50 floors, 20 apartments per floor, total 1,000 apartments. Average occupancy 1.8 people per unit, estimated population 1,800. How long until we all die? How long until it's my turn? I scribbled calculations on the walls of my apartment, the numbers a lifeline to rationality in this sea of madness. Loop number 6, Dave in 705. Probability of my death next is 0.056. Loop 7, the newlyweds in 710. Probability of my death next is 0.063. Loop number 8, the quiet guy in 702. Probability of my death next is 0.071. I stared at the numbers scrawled on my walls, trying to make sense of it all. The pattern of deaths, the room numbers, there had to be some logic to it. But my exhausted mind couldn't grasp it. It was well past midnight, not that time meant anything anymore, when I finally collapsed into bed. Sleep came quickly, a blessed escape from the nightmare that my life had become. Thump. My eyes snapped open. For a moment, I lay perfectly still, straining my ears. Thump thump. It was coming from the hallway. Slow, methodical, like someone, or something, was walking with great difficulty. Then came the laughter. It started low, almost inaudible. A chuckle that grew into a giggle, then erupted into full-blown hysterical laughter. The sound sent ice through my veins. I knew that laugh. Mrs. Paddle. But Mrs. Paddle was dead. I'd seen her body with my own eyes, just 2 loops ago. Trembling, I crept to the floor and pressed my eye to the peephole. The hallway was dark, but I could make out a figure shambling past. It moved jerkily like a puppet with half its strings cut. Then it turned and I had to bite back a scream. It was Mrs. Paddle, but not the kind, samosa-baking Mrs. Paddle I knew. Her skin was pale, almost translucent in the dim emergency lighting. Her head lolled at an unnatural angle, and her eyes... God, her eyes were black pits reflecting no light. She shuffled closer to my door and I saw her hands. The fingers were bloody, nails torn and ragged. As I watched, in a horror, she began scratching at the door across the hall, leaving crimson streaks on the wood. Come out, she sing-songed, her voice a horrific parody of her usual gentle tone. Time to play. I stumbled back from the door, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. This couldn't be real, it had to be a nightmare. But the sounds from the hallway continued, more thumps, more voices. I recognized Mr. Grayson's gravelly baritone, now twisted into a guttural growl. Dave's laugh, once warm and friendly, now a high-pitched cackle that set my teeth on edge. The dead were back, and they were wrong. I don't know how long I huddled in the corner of my apartment, hands pressed over my ears, trying to block out the sounds of my former neighbors roaming the halls. Hours, maybe. Time had lost all meaning. When silence finally fell, I dared to look through the peephole again. The hallway was empty, but the evidence of the night's horrors remained. Scratch marks on doors, smears of what looked disturbingly like blood on the walls. As the loop reset once more, I knew things had changed irrevocably. This wasn't just about solving the pattern of deaths anymore. Now I was in a race against time to break the cycle before I joined the ranks of the walking dead outside my door. I turned back to my calculations with renewed desperation. The room numbers, the orders of death. It had to mean something. As I mapped out the pattern, a thought struck me. What if the numbers weren't just room identifiers? What if they were coordinates? Or a code? With shaking hands, I grabbed a fresh sheet of paper and began to work. Somewhere in this twisted puzzle was the key to our salvation. I had to find it. The next loop was approaching, but who would be next? And more importantly, could I finally break this cycle of horror before we all ended up dead? Or worse, before we all came back? The realization hit me like a punch to my gut. My room was next. As the familiar darkness of the loops reset and engulfed me, I made a split-second decision. I couldn't be here when death came knocking. I slipped out of my apartment and into Mrs. Thompson's place across the hall. She'd been one of the first to go, and her door had never been locked since. I huddled in her bathtub, heart pounding, waiting for the inevitable scream that would signal another death, but it never came. Instead, the hallway erupted into chaos. Howls of rage echoed through the building, punctuated by the sound of fists pounding on doors. The shambling footsteps I'd grown accustomed to transformed into a frenzied sprint. They knew, somehow they knew I cheated death. As dawn broke, the sounds faded, but the implications of what had happened kept me rooted to the spot. If they got this angry when I skipped my turn, it meant I was the first. The first to survive, the first to break the pattern. But I couldn't stay in Mrs. Thompson's forever. I had to find a solution, and fast. When the next loop hit, I repeated my trick, this time hiding in Dave's old apartment. The reaction was even more violent. The entire building seemed to shake with their fury. I heard wood splintering as they began to break down doors. It was only a matter of time before they got to me. With the coming of daylight, I steeled myself and stepped into the hallway. I had to explore, to find answers before it was too late. The stairwell was a nightmare of smeared blood and scratch marks. Each floor I descended was worse than the last. By the time I reached the lobby, my shoes squelched with each step. And then I saw them. A group of maybe 20 or 30 of my former neighbors stood in the reception area. Mrs. Paddle, Mr. Grayson, Dave, all of them staring at me with black, empty eyes and wide, unnatural smiles. They didn't move, didn't attack, just watched. I took a hesitant step forward. Their heads snapped in unison to follow my movement, but they remained rooted to the spot. Another step. Still no attack, but a low growl began to build, like the rumble of an approaching storm. Dark fluid, too thick to be saliva, too dark to be blood, began to drip from their mouths as I inched closer to the main doors. Their growls grew darker, more frenzied. Then, as I reached for the handle, they moved. A single lightning-fast step forward in perfect synchronization. A warning. There was no escape that way. Panic rising in my throat, I turned and ran back to the stairs. I had to find help, find someone, anyone who might have answers. Floor after floor, I pounded on doors, screaming for help. I heard sobs behind some, hysterical laughter behind others, but no one would open up. Finally, exhausted and desperate, I found myself on the 50th floor, the penthouse level. Massive reinforced doors lined the hallway, the kind of security only the ultra-wealthy could afford. I collapsed against one, sliding down to sit on the floor. Tears streamed down my face as the hopelessness of the situation crashed over me. Then, impossibly, I heard a click. The door behind me swung open, and I tumbled backward, looking up into the face of a woman about my age. Her eyes were red-rimmed but alert, scanning the hallway before quickly pulling me inside and slamming the door shut. "Are you bit?" she demanded, keeping her distance. I shook my head, still too shocked to speak. "Good," she said, visibly relaxing. "I'm Emma, room 1000. "Alex," I managed to croak out. How are you still okay?" Emma's face darkened. "I'm not okay. None of us are okay, but I'm alive, if that's what you mean." She paused, studying me. "You're the one who broke the pattern, aren't you? That's why they're so pissed off." I nodded and, in a rush, told her everything I knew, everything I'd experienced. She listened intently, occasionally nodding as if confirming her own observations. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "There's something you need to see." Emma led me through her sprawling penthouse to a set of stairs I hadn't noticed before. "Private roof access," she explained as we climbed. "One of the perks of paying an obscene amount of money to live in a glass box in the sky." As we stepped out onto the roof, the full horror of our situation hit me like a physical blow. The city was dark, not just without power, but consumed by an unnatural, oppressive blackness. It was as if all life had been sucked out of it, and in that darkness, I could see movement. Vast, shadowy forms shifting and writhing, their edges blurring into the night. What the hell are those things?" I whispered, unable to tear my eyes away from the nightmarish scene. Emma's voice was barely audible over the wind. "I don't know, but I think they're what's causing this, and I think they're hungry." As if in response to her words, a chorus of howls rose from the streets below. The things in the darkness seemed to pulse with anticipation, and I realized, with a sickening reality, that our little time loop, our little game of death and skyline towers, was just the beginning. The real horror was out there, waiting for us. Time became a strange, fluid thing. The loops continued, but Emma and I found a rhythm. We'd spend our nights in her penthouse, the reinforced door our only protection against the horrors outside. During the day, we'd explore the building, searching for answers, for other survivors, for anything that might help us understand what was happening. The one silver lining to this nightmare was that with each reset, the rooms returned to their original state. Food, water, supplies, all replenished. It was a small comfort knowing that we'd never starve. But as Emma pointed out one night, her voice barely a whisper in the darkness, "What good is food if we're just waiting to die?" As days turned into weeks, Emma and I grew closer. Maybe it was the shared trauma, the knowledge that we only had each other, or maybe it was just human nature, reaching out for connection in the face of unimaginable horror. Whatever the reason, I found myself falling for her. Her strength, her dry humor in the face of our grim reality. The way her eyes still held a spark of hope even as the world crumbled around us. It started with small gestures, a lingering touch, a comforting embrace that lasted a little too long. Then one night, after a particularly harrowing close call with the creatures outside, we found solace in each other's arms. In those moments of passion, we could forget the horror surrounding us. It became our escape, our way of affirming that we were still alive, still human. We counted 36 loops, each one bringing new horrors, new losses. We watched as floor by floor, room by room, our neighbors succumbed to whatever force was consuming our world. And through it all, our bond deepened. It was around the 38th loop when Emma's period was late. At first, we dismissed it as stress, the trauma playing havoc with her body. But as days passed and her symptoms became undeniable, we faced a new, terrifying reality. Emma was pregnant. "Hell," she whispered, staring at the makeshift pregnancy test we'd cobbled together from supplies in various apartments. "Alex, what are we going to do?" The news hit us like a physical blow. A child in this nightmare? It seemed cruel, almost absurd. But as the initial shock wore off, something else took its place. Hope. A fragile, desperate kind of hope, but hope nonetheless. We started making plans. If it was a boy, we'd name him David after Emma's grandfather. A girl would be Lily, the name of my favorite aunt. We'd imagine a future where the loops had ended, where we'd escaped this tower of horrors and found a safe place to raise our child. These dreams kept us going even as our situation grew more dire. By the 40th loop, we'd given up on finding other survivors. The nightly chorus of screams had dwindled to just a few scattered cries. The daytime explorations revealed more and more empty apartments. Doors hanging off hinges, walls splattered with dark stains I tried not to think about too hard. It was in the 42nd loop that everything changed. We woke to silence. No screams, no pounding on doors, nothing. Maybe it's over, Emma said, her hand resting protectively over her still flat stomach. But her tone made it clear she didn't believe it. She ventured out, floor by floor, room by room. Every door was broken and every room was empty. No bodies, no blood, just emptiness. As we reached the lobby, the realization hit us both at the same time. We were the last two left. The last three if you counted our unborn child. Emma's hand found mine, squeezing tight. "What do we do now?" she asked. I opened my mouth to respond, but the words died in my throat, because at that moment, I saw something that made my blood run cold. There, in the center of the lobby, stood a figure. It wasn't one of the walking dead we'd grown accustomed to. This was something else entirely. It was me. But not me. This version of myself stood unnaturally still, head cocked at an impossible angle. Its eyes were black voids, and its mouth was stretched into a grotesque, too-wide smile that split its face almost in half. "Welcome home," it said, in a voice that was mine but not mine. A voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Emma's grip on my hand tightened to the point of pain. "Alex," she whispered, her voice trembling. "What the hell is happening?" But I couldn't answer because as I stared at this nightmarish version of myself, memories started flooding back, memories that couldn't be mine but somehow were. I remembered the darkness, the hunger, the joy of the hunt. I remembered creating this loop, this game, this feeding ground. I remembered choosing Skyline Towers, choosing each and every resident. I remembered choosing Emma. "No," I whispered, stumbling backwards, instinctively moving to shield Emma and her unborn child. "No, this can't be real." The thing wearing my face took a step back. "Oh, but it is," it said, its grin growing impossibly wider. "You've played your part beautifully, and now it's time for the final act." As if on cue, the darkness outside seemed to press against the window, hungry, waiting, and I realized with the horror that threatened to shatter my sanity that it wasn't just the building that was trapped in a loop, it was me. I was the architect of this nightmare. I was the monster, and Emma and our child were my final victims, my unwitting partners in this cosmic horror show. As the thing that was me and not me reached for us, as Emma's scream pierced the air, as darkness rushed in, I had one last terrible thought. How many times had we done this before? How many times would we do it again? How many children had we dreamed of only to lose them to this endless cycle of horror? The loop was complete and it was starting all over again. I woke up gasping, my heart pounding in my chest. The familiar surroundings of my apartment greeted me, bathed me in the soft glow of morning light. What the hell? A gentle knock on my door made me jump. "Alex, are you okay in there?" Mrs. Paddle's voice, concerned but very much alive. I stumbled to the door, yanking it open. There she stood, alive and well, looking at me with worry. "I heard a scream. Is everything all right?" My mind reeled. This was the beginning. Loop number 1. I'm fine," I managed to stammer out. "Just a bad dream." As I closed the door, the other me's words in the lobby echoed in my head. "You've played your part beautifully. What the hell did that mean?" I tried to think back, to remember what I was doing before all this started. My eyes fell on my laptop, still open on the desk. How had I not thought to check it before? I rushed over, and there it was. A terminal window running in the tray, streams of numbers and code flashing by too fast to read, and suddenly, it all came flooding back. The AI I was developing to analyze and predict power grid failures. I'd connected it to the building's power supply for a test run, and then, crap. It must have been caused by a massive power surge, creating some kind of electromagnetic force field around the building. And the AI trapped within the building systems had, created this nightmare realm, messed with time itself? I tried to stop the program, but everything was frozen. Everything except that damn terminal, endlessly scrolling. In a moment of desperate inspiration, I yanked the power cord from the wall. For a second, nothing happened. Then I heard it. The hum of electricity getting louder. Lights flickered on. Outside, I could see power returning to the city block by block. Oh God, Emma. I bolted from my apartment, sprinting up the stairs to the 50th floor. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but I didn't stop. I had to know if she remembered, if she was okay. I pounded on the door of room 1000, praying, hoping. The door swung open, and there she was, Emma, but not my Emma. She stood there in a beautiful red dress, looking puzzled at my disheveled appearance. "Oh, room service. Great," she said cheerfully, pointing at a pile of clothes on her couch. "Could you take care of those for me?" I stood there, frozen. No recognition in her eyes, no sign of the pregnancy, nothing. It was like it had never happened, because for her, it hadn't. The following days were a blur. I experienced glitches, I guess you'd call them. Flashes of the horror we'd lived through, but I knew it was just my mind playing tricks on me. The loops were over. I tried to move on, to forget, but how do you forget the love of your life? How do you forget the child you'll never have? I couldn't handle it, ended up checking myself into a psychiatric hospital. Spent 2 months there trying to convince myself it wasn't real, that I hadn't lost everything, but I couldn't let it go. I couldn't let her go, so against my better judgment, I found myself back at Skyline Towers. My old apartment was occupied, but luck was on my side. The new tenant, a sweet old lady named Dorothy, was more than happy to let me in when I spun a cheerful story about having lived there before. "Oh, how lovely. I always enjoy a bit of building history," Dorothy said, ushering me inside. "Why don't I put on some tea while you look around?" As she bustled off to the kitchen, my eyes were drawn to the wall where I'd scribbled my frantic calculations. It was a different color now, noticeably off from the rest of the room. A sofa had been pushed up against it. I moved closer, running my hand over the paint. Felt uneven. "That paint doesn't match the room, does it?" Dorothy's voice made me jump. "Yeah," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It was a different color before." Dorothy nodded, setting down the tea tray. "Oh yes, the landlord told me about that. Said someone had vandalized the wall with scribbles. When I moved in, it was just black stains. Probably someone tried to wash them off. So I had my grandson paint over it. This was the only color he had in his garage, and I didn't want to bother him to buy a different one." My heart was pounding. Did you see any of the writing before it was painted over?" Dorothy frowned, thinking. "Oh, I did find some papers under the mattress when I first moved in. Full of weird scribbles, text, and numbers. Couldn't make heads or tails of it, except for one word they kept repeating. Loop, or something like that. I just threw it in the trash, didn't know what to make of it. I felt like I couldn't breathe. It was real, it had all been real. I made my excuses to Dorothy and left as quickly as I could without seeming rude. My mind was racing. The scribbles on the wall, the paper with calculations, it was all proof that I hadn't imagined it. The loops, Emma, our child, it had all happened. Now sitting in my current apartment, I'm writing this all down because I need someone to know, because I'm scared of what might happen next. But I'm even more scared of doing nothing. I have to go back. I have to try to recreate the events, to get back the love of my life, to get back Emma. It sounds crazy, I know. Hell, maybe I am crazy, but with this proof, I can't just let it go. I'm going to dig deeper. There has to be more evidence, more clues about what really happened in Skyline Towers, about the AI I created and the nightmare it spawned. I'll keep you updated, Reddit. If I find anything interesting, or if something goes terribly wrong, you'll be the first to know. If you don't hear from me again, well, either I've succeeded in going back in the loops, or something much worse has happened. Wish me luck, or don't. I'm not sure which is worse anymore. My gated community has one rule: no laughing after dark. 1 week ago, my wife and I moved into a gated community called Brave Row, one of those cutout paradises with an aesthetic so vivid in photos, yet anemic in reality. After living there 2 days, we moved to a hotel, and this will be our home for the foreseeable future. We just need to sell the property and find a new one. Anything, anywhere. Far from Brave Row, that's the only requirement. The nefarious nature of that place only became apparent once the street's rule had been broken. No laughing after dark. "Honey," I called, chuckling. "What?" my wife replied from the other room. "Get in here and see this," I said. Rowan strolled into the lobby with a beam on her face, still intoxicated by our new home. She rubbed a loving hand down my back, tracing the curvature of my spine. "What's got you smirking, Owen?" she asked. "This," I said, proudly displaying the leaflet that I'd found on the doormat. Rowan leaned forwards and read it alongside me. "Dear Owen and Rowan, this is Irene from the Brave Row HOA. Welcome to day 1 of your new life in this safe, vibrant community. You've already met Gordon, our resident security guard, so you'll know that safety is of the utmost importance to us. and the vibrancy of this community is apparent, but it extends beyond superb landscaping and house-proud homeowners. It is the people who make this street vibrant. Parties and events such as our regular garden gatherings and film nights make this truly a place to call home. However, I do think it prudent to inform you of one particular rule that, without exception, will be enforced. There must be no laughing after dark. This is not a matter of noise. We understand that all residents will want to watch TV, listen to music, or simply talk. Sound is an unavoidable part of life. But laughter between sunset and sunrise is strictly prohibited in Brave Row. What constitutes as after dark? There is no specific time at which laughter must cease. After all, the sun sets around 4 o'clock in winter and nearly 10 o'clock at the height of summer. Moreover, there is a window of murkiness between day and night. I understand that this may confuse you. You might be wondering when to keep quiet. If you want my advice, Mr. and Mrs. Neville, I would suggest that you not risk laughing once the day's light starts to fade. Once the sun begins to creep close to the horizon. This is not a rule enforced in a black and white manner. It's not even a rule enforced by the HOA. Aside from that, there really is nothing to bear in mind. I do not run an oppressive association. You've already read and signed the contract. You know how we operate. Grow your hedges as tall as you wish. Paint your front door a garish color. Walk the streets after midnight if that pleases you. Just do not laugh after dark. I told you I didn't want to live with rich people. They're unhinged, my wife said. No laughing after dark? What sort of dystopian nonsense is that? I hate moving. There's always something the estate agent fails to mention. Some catch with every too-good-to-be-true property, I sighed. Sure, there was a broken dishwasher in the first place, the busted taps in the second place, the oven that fell loose in the third place. Issues that the agents and homeowners should have mentioned, Rowan said. But I thought we were past all of that, Owen. I thought buying a house at such a sickening price meant that we'd be able to forgo absurd problems. I know, I nodded. And this is worse than any of the other issues in our old houses because we won't even be able to fix the problem, Rowan pointed out. Of course we will. We shall become joyless husks, my dear wife, I sarcastically teased, maintaining a straight face as I embraced her. For there is no laughter in Brave Row. This is a place of principles, of sincerity, I say. Go forth, my wench, and prepare me a sandwich in the kitchen. My wife offered a blank face. Actually, I don't know why I was worrying. There's no chance of laughing with you around. I could tell by the look on her lips that Rowan wanted to chortle. So did I. But in spite of our sarcastic responses to the letter, my wife and I were still drawn to the setting sun beyond the window. And I knew we were thinking the same thing. It would be moronic not to follow the rule for the first night at least. I sensed that Rowan felt just as uneasy as me, felt as if this were more than HOA authoritarianism. Given how lax they seemed on all other fronts, this one rule was unsettling. Why laughter? Why that sound above all others? The sound of joy itself. I was too tired to unpack the baffling contents of the letter, so I decided I would discuss it with the head of HOA in the morning. I rang as soon as I woke up. Owen Neville, so wonderful to receive a call from you, Irene heartily laughed. How was your first night in Brave Row? It was good, I uncertainly replied. Irene, I'm calling you about the welcome letter. Ah, I see. Did everything make sense? She asked warmly, yet obliviously. I frowned before realizing the woman obviously hadn't seen my face on the other end of the phone. Well, yes and no. It was relatively straightforward. There wasn't much to digest, but one thing befuddled the two of us, the rule about laughter. Irene did not pause, and her bubbly tone did not falter. Yes, no laughing after dark. I did explain how to interpret that. There's no exact cutoff point. No moment at which day becomes night. Do you understand? I sighed. It's not about that, Irene. It's about the nature of the restriction itself. Does it not seem a little totalitarian to you? I'd understand a rule such as no noise after 11 in the evening, but a rule about not laughing after dark is so oddly specific and it doesn't seem warranted. I don't see why laughing would ever be worse than other noises that neighbors could make. I paused, but Irene said nothing, so I continued. Plus, as you mentioned in the letter, the sun sets early in winter. Are you seriously suggesting that on Christmas Day, to give an example, Rowan and I wouldn't be able to have a joyous time with our family after, say, 3 or 4 in the afternoon? Not at all, Mr. Neville. Be as joyous as you want throughout the year. Irene gasped, as if horrified that I would suggest something so preposterous. I'm only saying that you wouldn't be able to laugh after dark, not until the sun rises once more. I grumbled. I have to say, I'm more than frustrated to be learning of this rule after finalizing the contract. Did you not talk to the letting agent about Brave Row's HOA before purchasing the property? Irene asked. Yes, I spat. I signed your association's agreement and there is no mention of this rule. I know that because I read it again this morning, so this isn't legally enforceable. You're absolutely right, Mr. Neville. It isn't legally enforceable, Irene said. I huffed, irritably. Right, so did I mention anything about a possible breach of our contract? Irene interrupted. Did I mention anything about the consequence of breaking the rule? Did I mention, for example, about seizing the property should you not comply? Well, no, I said, but what's the point of making a rule that you wouldn't be able to enforce? As I mentioned in the letter, Mr. Neville, I'm not the one who enforces it, Irene replied, before lowering her volume. The HOA doesn't make the rule, we simply inform. I see, I muttered through clenched teeth, tiring of the cheery busybody. So what would be the consequence of my wife or I deciding to laugh after dark? For the first time in our entire conversation, Irene fell silent, hesitated for a moment. Longer than a moment, in fact. It was her only sign of humanity throughout the call, the only sign that she was more than a pre-programmed series of chipper, dismissive statements. This is a spectacular neighborhood, Mr. Neville, Irene solemnly said. The 50 residents of Brave Row lead happy lives, and I hope you and Rowan join them. I truly do. But we have all had to sacrifice something for such peace, such security from the outside world. And that something is laughter, Mr. Neville, only during those dark hours of the day. That's not an answer, Irene, I said. What would be the consequence? I wish you'd known the poor souls who found out, Irene replied coldly. If you had, you wouldn't be asking questions. You'd not dare to laugh ever again. The curt woman, whose jolly demeanor has entirely dissipated, abruptly ended the call, and I was left sitting in my study for the rest of the day, ignoring messages from my boss and coworkers, not only refusing to work, but refusing to move. That may seem a little extreme, but you'd understand my reaction if you'd overheard that call, if you'd lived on the street of Brave Row for a mere 2 days as my wife and I did, because we certainly didn't stay after what happened on the second night. I was stirred from my trance, which must have lasted hours, around 9 in the evening. Rowan had finally returned home from another late night at the hospital, and the slam of the front door seemed to finally bolt my frozen body from its paralysis. Still, the sudden return to reality didn't make me feel any better about the call with Irene. I didn't dismiss the call as the overbearing control of a tyrannical association. No, I believed the old woman. I believed that something awful would happen if we were to laugh. I had no idea what that something might be, but I'm no fool. I wasn't gonna wait for an answer. I didn't want an answer. I wanted my wife and I to sell our home. I wanted us to buy a hotel for a night and figure everything else after that. Owen? Rowan called. I shakily stumbled out of the office, wondering what had possessed me, wondering why my heart was beating so quickly. Irene's just a power-hungry socialite, I told myself. You should hire a lawyer. Talk about this arbitrary rule which wasn't included in the agreement. That was what the rational part of my brain said. However, the irrational part of my brain, the part that steered by my sick gut, told me to ignore logic, ignore reason, and listen to that ever-present dread in my heart. The dread that told me to listen to Irene. The dread that told me to take my wife away from Brave Row. By the time I reached the lobby, I was panting. Sweetie, My eyes widened when I saw that Rowan wasn't alone. Her colleague, Joanne, was standing beside her. My wife's friend wore a smile on her face. Sorry, it's been a wild day, Rowan sighed, walking over to me and planting a kiss on my cheek. I'm just going to lend Jo one of my dresses. She's got a fun night planned out for tomorrow. I'll be out of your hair in a jiffy, Owen, Joanne promised. I followed my wife upstairs and started whispering. Honey, I said, I talked to Irene. Something is very wrong with this place. What do you mean? My wife replied as we reached the upstairs landing. Did you tell her the HOA didn't mention a noise rule in the agreement we signed? Yes, I said. She admitted that it isn't even an official rule, nothing that could be legally enforced. Good, Rowan smiled. Case closed, sweetheart. No, I shook my head. It isn't closed. She told me that the rule is enforced by, well, she didn't say who enforces it. She just said some really disturbing things, Rowan. Said that others had learned the consequence the hard way. She was giving me a warning, or a threat. My wife frowned. Should we find an attorney? This isn't right. This bullying tactic. It must breach our contract or some law. We can fix all that later, I said. Right now, I want to get out of here. What? Rowan asked. Sweetie, we just moved into this place. And I'm telling you to trust me, honey. I begged, still breathing heavily. Do you? Well, of course, Owen, but you're starting to make me anxious, my wife shivered. What did Irene say to you? It was her voice, Rowan. The way she mentioned the consequence, it wasn't right. Any of it. I think we should get out of here, I pleaded. I expected my wife to resist, expected her to roll her eyes and say that life doesn't work that way. We just bought the house. To sell it immediately based on an unnerving phone call might seem a little extreme to some people, and if there were any other reason for my distrust, then I would absolutely agree. I'd argue that we should stand our ground, hire that attorney, laugh for hours in the comfort of our own home simply to spite the maniacs in charge. But I believed that woman, and Rowan clearly believed me. Okay, my wife nodded. I'll fetch that dress for Joanne, then we'll go to the hotel. But tomorrow, we have to sort everything. I smiled tearfully. Thank you, honey. What are you two doing up here? Didn't stumble into your bed on the way to the wardrobe, did you? Joanne laughed loudly from downstairs. Ouch, my wife yelped. My fingers had involuntarily tightened like talons around Rowan's upper arms, and I immediately released her when I regained control. Then my eyes shot to the bedroom window, eyeing the burnt orange circle which painted the horizon. A sliver of sunlight persisted on that humid summer's evening. A glow at the end of a blackened tunnel. I prayed, for the first time in my atheistic life, prayed that Joanne had laughed before dark. Owen? Rowan whispered, lip trembling. Would you call it dark outside? I croaked. My wife's head rolled slowly to the window, then returned her frightful eyes to me. It'll be fine, honey. I'm sure it'll be fine. Joanne didn't know about the rule we'll receive a slap on the wrist or something. Like you said, there was nothing about laughter in the contract. By the haunted look in Rowan's eyes, it was clear that she, like me, sensed something. A foreboding ripple in the air, which felt and smelled like rotten breath. I felt it a day earlier, when we unloaded our belongings from the moving van. The sensation of a hidden thing within Brave Row, a watcher, a listener. Hello, Joanne called again, chuckling. Won't she stop? I mumbled, clutching clumps of my hair. Come on, Rowan whimpered, clumsily plucking a blue gingham dress from the rack. She'll take this, leave, and then we'll leave too, okay? I nodded, stepping in front of my wife and taking the dress from her. Then we walked across the landing, like weary prisoners on death row. I tentatively peered over the banister at Joanne, the smiling woman donning turquoise scrubs that matched those of my wife. I was frustrated and terrified in equal measure by the innocence of Rowan's friend, the ignorance. The problem wasn't simply that Jo hadn't read the letter, it was that she clearly didn't feel what Rowan and I felt. Though my wife and I had been jubilant on that first day in our new home, our property had been pre-furnished with a weighty blanket of darkness. Something I'd read in Rowan's eyes, and I'm sure she must have read it in mine. You took your time, Joanne giggled, piercing my heart with fright for the third time. It tickled me seeing you run upstairs after her. Did Rowan need your fashion tips, Owen? Something like that, I whispered, hurriedly handing the dress to my wife's friend. Are you okay back there, Rowan? Joanne smiled, peering at my wife, who timidly stepped out from behind me. Come over shy all of a sudden? I'm starting to think you coy lovers really did get up to something. Ah, to be young again. Anyway, thank you very much, sweetheart. You're an absolute lifesaver. And this dress, I'm sure to catch the eye of... Joanne was interrupted. Not by knocking on the door, not by the disappearance of lights in the house, not by any ominous sign I expected. She was interrupted by her own spontaneous choking, seemingly prompted by nothing. Joanne? Rowan gasped, rushing forwards. My wife managed to catch her frightened friend in outstretched arms. Tears swam in Joanne's eyes as her legs buckled and she gasped for air. Then Rowan started to perform the Heimlich maneuver as snot spilled from Joanne's nostrils, and I contended with the terrifying prospect of witnessing somebody die. Several excruciating seconds later, with a slight crunch from Joanne's splintering ribcage, a vile stream of bile released from the back of her throat. And in the mess, which spread in a festering pool on the floor, there floated a crumpled piece of paper. Being the only non-squeamish member of the trio, and noting that the other two were still recovering from the trauma of Joanne's sudden fit, I knelt down to pluck the node from the lake of vomit. It bore neat printed lines of text in a minute font. After I scraped a streak of sick away, 2 sentences became legible. Expulsion notice. Please exit through the basement. I read the note aloud whilst Joanne continued to splutter and my wife eyed me disbelievingly. So I read the note again and again. Joanne looked twice as perplexed as Rowan. I understood their reactions, of course, understood that none of it seemed rational. We did not have an explanation for the note's mysterious arrival. Joanne hadn't swallowed the slip of paper. It had simply emerged the top of her throat, corking her trachea. Not in an attempt to end her, clearly, given the note's second sentence. Please exit through the basement. But we didn't immediately obey. Joanne screamed as she flung the front door open. It revealed not the front porch, but the kitchen, and the back door of the house opened onto the front entryway. Windows opened onto the interiors of various other rooms throughout the house. This was the case not only for Joanne, but for Rowan and me too. We were all doomed in the same fate, trapped in a looping house far from the real world. The horror of our predicament became unavoidable. We had one option. What happens if we do as it says, if we exit through the basement? My wife whispered. What is happening? Joanne wailed, barely registering anything. I shakily answered, You laughed, Joanne. What are you saying? The woman shrieked tearfully, snot still staining her face. How did that appear in my throat? We don't understand it either, Rowan whispered, holding her friend's hand whilst turning to me. But we have to try the basement. It's the only room left. I gulped, nodding, and Joanne sobbed whilst I led the 2 of them to the door. It opened with a slight creak, and I should have breathed a sigh of relief at seeing the basement's darkened staircase, rather than a portal to another room in the house, but there was no wave of euphoria. Only that blackened tide of fear rolling towards my mind, threatening something worse than an end. By then, I was haunted by the idea that death might be a kinder fate than whatever lay below. I guided us into the darkness, taking fragile steps and spinning my head frequently to ensure that Rowan and Joanne remained behind me. Once we reached the lightless basement floor, the door at the top of the stairs loudly closed. Panicking, I fumbled for the light switch, but it was gone. There seemed to be nothing down here, none of our unpacked boxes, no shelving units, just an empty, unlit room. A black expanse. What now? Joanne timidly asked. I have no idea, I replied. We should look for the exit, Rowan said. This is the exit, I whispered. That's what the note said. No, Joanne said. My wife agreed. Joe's right, there must be more to it than that. No, Joanne repeated, interrupting her more forcefully. Joe, are you okay? Rowan asked, shuffling around and grabbing my arm. Is that you? No, it's me, I said, taking my wife's hand. I thought you were holding on to her? I was, but Joe, where are you? She queried fearfully. No, Joanne sobbed, her voice and presence seeming to have disappeared into the blackness. Then came a laughter. Not a kind laugh, not a laugh of joy, not even a mocking sound. It was a laugh devoid of soul, devoid of life, one that seemed to simply serve as the welcome to some eternal nightmare. A noise that Joanne seemed to be blindly walking towards, willfully or not. I clutched at air, or a void with my free hand, desperate to find her. Stop it, Joe cried, sounding far too distant for such a compact basement. Why are you laughing? Show yourself. Who's there? Where? Oh God, no. What are you? What are you? My wife's friend screamed as she saw something in the dark. Something that Rowan and I did not see. Something I realized was too terrible for living eyes, given that Joanne had perished. I'm not sure how I knew that. I simply understood that she would not return to the land of the living. I understand that she was not simply exiting Brave Row. She was exiting reality, and she would not be entering some joyous afterlife. I had no doubt that a hellish, torturous eternity awaited. Squeaking wood sounded, and I rotated my head. Rowan and I had only walked a few steps from the staircase, but it was inexplicably a few hundred yards behind us. The open door at the top of the stairs cast light from the lobby. It was the only visible thing in the void that had swallowed Joanne, the void that still threatened to swallow Rowan and me. Come on, I yelled, dragging my wife behind me. As we darted towards the escape, I started to feel something more physical in the absence of the room, a manifestation of the dark tide that had been approaching my mind. Joanne whimpered incoherently from a place both near and far. Owen, Rowan cried as we reached the stairs. We have to go, I ordered, pushing my wife onto the first step. Please, Owen, she begged. There must be something, some way to save her. I turned for a moment and immediately felt a searing pain in my brain. That black tide had finally arrived, submerging the joy from my soul, pushing it from reach. The dark brought not suffering, but the promise of suffering. It was a warning from whatever lay in the deepness of the basement. Whatever thing beyond the laws of man enforced the rule. Rowan and I had obeyed. Joanne had not. It was as awfully simple as that. But my wife and I were being offered safe passage from the terror. We were on the stairs, mere yards away from safety. Still, I considered it for a moment. Considered what Rowan had said. There had to be a way of saving Joanne, and place that defied all spatial laws. I still felt the presence of my wife's friend. Felt her cries burrowing deeply into my ears, as distant as they sounded. The place was a trick. She might have been only yards from us. I believed I could do something, but the Watcher read my thoughts, read my intent to plunge into the darkness and rescue the old woman. That likely would have broken some other unspoken rule for a hand stretch from the black, and it did not belong to Joanne. It was a skeletal, six-fingered appendage, cloaked in ragged, ripped strips of gray skin. It was not skin at all, of course, just as the hand was not a hand. It was not anything that belonged to anyone. Worst of all, I know it did not even belong to the Watcher. It was a tool used to make a point. If I had seen even a sliver of that thing's true form, I would have been broken, like Joanne. Whatever enforced the rule of joyless evenings in Brave Row, it did not come from anywhere earthly. And it did not take Joanne to anywhere earthly. I screamed, retreating from the fingers as they sought to snatch me. Perhaps by returning to the dark and searching for Joanne, I would have also faced a horrible doom. But I didn't allow myself to find out. I narrowly swerved the hand and followed Rowan clumsily up the stairs before slamming the door behind us. We ran to the front entrance and she pushed down the handle to reveal a wonderful sight. Our porch. Our driveway, more importantly. We did not stop to pack. Did not stop to think. We bundled into the car, drove away from Brave Row, and promised never to look back. We don't even plan to collect our things. Even at the sun's high point, I wouldn't risk uttering even the simplest, slightest giggle in Brave Row. Besides, there are things worse than material loss. Things worse than death even. But I never gazed at those things, and I pray I never will. I pray for something truly awful, in truth. I wish that Joanne had died before seeing whatever she saw. Children in the Forest. As a new resident of Essex County, Massachusetts, I was well aware of its horrifying history. Between Salem and Ipswich, I was fully prepared to tackle the colonies of witches and sea creatures of Lovecraft. Well, that's what I told my 7-year-old daughter. Being alive at this point in history has its upsides, such as having the highest life expectancy in human history. But there are also downsides, like having a daughter who has access to the internet. Since my divorce, Lila has needed access to a phone. Despite my attempts at monitoring her online usage, she's smart. Gonna be smarter than me one day if I do this whole parenting thing right. Not even 20 minutes after telling Lila about the move, she came bursting into the living room demanding that we stay put here in Rhode Island. It's been perfect in the Ocean State for us. It's quiet, the grocery store, movie theater, gym, everything is just a short drive away, and there's a pretty good school system. However, finding work as an IT employee has been difficult. Even after submitting 50+ applications with nearly 7 years of experience in the field, you'd think I'd be swept up right away, but that's not the case for me. So when I got offered a position for nearly $80K a year, I jumped on the opportunity. Lila has never had to move out of the state before. My partner and I separated about 2 years ago now, and even then, we both moved no more than 20 minutes away from one another, so Lila didn't have to move schools or adjust as much. Telling her that we'd be moving nearly 2 hours away was difficult, but in the end, she didn't seem to mind at the moment. If anything, she seemed excited to help me pick out an apartment. No decision gets made without my little girl. But anyway, after our conversation and her eventual barging back into the living room, I had to convince her that no witches or eldritch beings would come to capture us in our sleep. Lila's always been creative. She's either nose deep in books or drawing with the special art pencils I got her for the winter months. After some quick thinking, it seemed like only a potion could keep us safe, so I quickly made my way to the kitchen to create a protection spell. Nothing some good old showmanship couldn't create. Some pink lemonade, ginger ale, a small splash of Tabasco sauce, and some fancy glasses would do just fine. I don't think the spice was all that necessary, but it seemed to create a nice little extra dash of realism that made Lila's face pucker up when she downed the potion. Just like that, we were safe in her little world. We moved right at the end of June. I wanted Lila to have time to adjust to the new state and not immediately have to jump right into being the new kid at school. Our new townhouse was nice. It had 2 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, perfect for the 2 of us. The kitchen was spacious and the living room offered plenty of space for both of our random hobbies and activities. What I really enjoy is the amount of space there is behind the townhouse. There's a lot of natural beauty in the area with plenty of trails and bike paths to choose from. Lila currently has the goal to become a soccer player, so having plenty of yard space proved to be a nice bonus for us both. I would never let her go out there unsupervised, of course, but I'm home often enough that she doesn't complain. On the downside, there was the occasional field mouse that would find its way into the walls, and the landlord would have to set out traps to keep them from causing too much damage. Like I said earlier, I was lucky enough to get an IT job at one of the local colleges. I'm sure you could figure it out if you dig hard enough, but I'll try to maintain some level of privacy. The college has a daycare and youth program that gets taken out of our paycheck if an employee is interested in the facilities. Seeing as we now live a few hours away from Lila's last babysitter, this was really the only option. Much to my relief, they had plenty of opportunities that she grew to be excited about. With my daughter taken care of, I was able to focus on work. In all honesty, it was easier than my last job, had better benefits, and paid more. For a few weeks, things went great, perfect even. Lila made some friends at the youth program, and work was everything that I wanted and then some. Plus, if I'm here in 10 years, Lila could pretty much become a student with minimal costs. It was a Thursday. The college semester wouldn't start until August, so things were going smoothly in the office. Every so often, I'd have to run to do a college-wide update to a few of our systems, but other than the occasional issue with an account for a new incoming student, I was free to explore other work-related endeavors on the clock. Because of a power outage, we were able to leave the office early for the day, only by 2 hours, but getting out at 3 is much better than 5 p.m. at rush hour. Lila is more than excited for the change of plans. When I propose we hike one of the trails behind our townhouse, her response nearly deafens me with her shriek. On the drive home, I notice her furiously typing away on her phone, no doubt telling her friends back home about our plans. It's about 80 degrees, but there's a nice wind that provides a nice breath of fresh air. The trail is almost entirely shaded, so luckily for us, we won't really have to worry about the sunscreen. It's moments like this that I live for, really. Everything I do is for my little girl. Every giggle, every smile makes everything I do worth it. When we get home, we rush into the house to change into appropriate workout clothes. I cannot wait to take off my polo shirt and pants and switch them for a loose shirt and shorts. Lila waits patiently in the living room for me, nose deep in her phone, not even realizing when I stand in front of her. I stand and say, "Seems like outside time is just what you need right now." "Sorry, Dad, I'm just texting with my friend right now." "I'm just glad you have some friends to chat with. You meet them from the youth center?" I don't want to be nosy, but it's my job as a father to be, of course. His name is Jay. We met outside when Miss Sarah took us out for tag." She stands from the couch and leaves her phone on the small table beside her. "I'm ready when you are, Dad. You always take so long to get ready." I jokingly roll my eyes, and this gets a giggle out of her, and soon I'm chasing her to the front door. It's true, when we get home, I take off my tie and just sit at the edge of the bed for a moment to close my eyes and take a few deep breaths. It's tough being an adult. Sometimes a moment alone can be a lifesaver. Lila runs ahead of me, and I jog after her. I'm not really worried that she'll run out of sight. There's not really anywhere she could go off to, but even so, she always stays in my line of sight. We make our way onto the well-worn path, and I take a nice deep breath of fresh air. Pollen coats the air, and I can tell that flowers are sprouting up nearby. It just smells fresh and healthy out here. We go at our own pace and take in the surroundings. Every so often, Lila will ask me about a random flower that she sees or question what type of bird might be calling. More often than not, I don't have the real answer to her questions, but a good response of, "What do you think it is?" more than often satisfies whatever answer she's looking for. We must have been walking for close to an hour before we start circling back towards home. We didn't make it all that far, in all honesty, but that just means we have less of a distance to walk back. The both of us have been quiet for a little bit, enjoying the peace, when a sudden feeling of concern goes through me. I look towards Lila, and she seems to be doing just fine, balancing on a fallen log beside the trail as we walk back. I look around our surroundings and don't notice anything out of the ordinary. It's been a year or so since I've had an anxiety or panic attack, and by how fast my heart begins to beat, I can tell that the exercise must have triggered something. I make sure to tell myself that I know exactly what's going on. My elevated heart rate probably just triggered an attack. There's no need to be concerned. It's a beautiful day, and if I need to sit down, I can sit down. I've told Lila about this type of situation and what to do. Just take it easy, don't panic, be calm, and get an authority figure if needed. When I pull myself out of my inner thoughts, I'm caught off guard when Lila isn't in front of me. I stop and immediately turn around, spotting her standing just off the trail staring into the woods. You okay? What's going on? I try not to let panic show in my tone. When she doesn't respond, I walk over to her and kneel down. You good, sweetie? Her face looks pale, like all the blood is drained from it. I fix my gaze to where she's looking, but don't spot anything. What is it? You're starting to worry me. After opening and closing her mouth a few times, she says, there were kids out there, but she couldn't finish what she wanted to say and finally turned to look at me. Daddy, I want to go home. That's when I knew something was really wrong. She hasn't called me that for a few years now. An immeasurable sense of dread washes over me. It feels like something is watching us. Occasionally there are mountain lions and sometimes brown bears in the area, but this feeling is something entirely different. I snatch up Lila and she wraps her arms and legs around me, burying her face into my shoulder. I take off down the trail back towards home. Lila, I need you to tell me if something is following us, I snap, eyes darting to each side of the trail. I feel her head move up and she immediately shrieks, Dad! I plant my feet in the ground and quickly turn around, ready for whatever it may be. My gaze tilts down, and no more than 5 feet away from me are 2 figures. Both of them young children, one boy and one girl, standing in front of me. Both of them looking no more than 14. It's like I can feel their presence as they stand unflinching. Right away, I can tell that the dreadful feeling is emanating off of them in waves. They're both wearing long sleeves and pants with no definitive branding or anything on them. Even so, with the skin that is exposed, they look sickly pale in the shade of the trees. They're just children. They can't do anything to me, but then why am I so terrified? It's like I'm caught in the view of a deadly predator. What do you want? Are you lost? I ask. It's clear that they are the ones controlling the situation. At the same time, both of them speak with a dull buzz coating their words. We lost our friend, have you seen her? Their voices don't have the tone of a question, more like they already possess the answer. We haven't seen anyone, it's just been me and my daughter. I force the words out of my throat. She can be our friend. They speak at the same time again, taking a step towards us. My eyes widen when I finally meet their gaze. Their eyes are an endless void of black, taking in whatever sunlight dribbles across their orbs and reflecting nothing back. All I can bring myself to say is, no, she can't. My body is trembling and I can feel Lila's nails digging into my neck. I hesitantly take a step back, keeping my eyes locked on the pair. When they don't do the same, I take another. I keep walking backward, afraid to even blink and have them leave my vision. Eventually, I'm forced to, and when I open my eyes, they are gone from sight. When we make it back to the apartment, I immediately lock the door and call the police. Each step away from where we saw the kids, the feeling of dread lessens. I'm not sure what to tell the cops other than 2 lost kids were roaming the woods looking for their friend. I give them the best description I can, but I can't bring myself to tell them about their eyes. The rest of the day goes without incident, but that doesn't stop me from being on full alert. I wait for a knock on the door or for that horrible feeling to come back, but it doesn't. The TV stays on for the rest of the evening. I'm afraid of sitting in silence, and I think Lila appreciates it too. Even she stays in the living room for the rest of the day rather than disappearing into her room. I don't even say anything when she gets lost in her phone. When nighttime comes around, I walk Lila to her room and tuck her in, which I haven't done for the last few years now at her request. But for tonight, I can't say I blame her for wanting the extra security. I kiss her on the forehead, and when we say our goodnights, I leave her door open a crack, so that when I sit on the couch for the rest of the night, I can see the foot of her bed. 10 p.m. rolls around, and instead of crawling into my bed, I make myself comfortable on the couch. I can't shake the feeling that something more is supposed to happen. Lila saw the black-eyed children too, so I know it's not my imagination. With the blinds closed and all the windows and doors in the house locked, we are as safe as we could possibly be. Because we share a wall with the neighbors, a good shout would be able to alert them if anything did happen at all. They were just kids. It's not like they could do anything. 11 p.m. rolls around, and I'm tossing and turning on the couch with the possibility of sleep seeming like a fantasy. Every so often, I check on Lila, and she's fast asleep. I have to get up around 6, so I'm not looking forward to the lack of sleep I'll have for tomorrow, but I've done far worse. 1 a.m. rolls around, and I'm staring daggers into the ceiling. It feels like I'm next up to the bat at the World Series, and it all comes down to me. I know it's all from earlier, but I just can't shake this nagging feeling of I don't even know what to call it. At moments, I even get the feeling that the police are gonna come banging at my door under the pretense that I either kidnapped those kids or made up the whole story. It doesn't help that another field mouse must have burrowed itself into the wall because there's a slight scratching noise every so often. I'd rather deal with the mice than whatever this night was. Another episode of my show ends, and I've given up sleeping at this point. I know I'll have to call out tomorrow, but at the very least, if Lila was still interested in going to the youth program, I could tap. In the silence of the credits, a minuscule noise barely whispers into my ears. Tap. I wipe whatever fuzz could be in my ears and mute the TV, daring for the noise to happen again. My heartbeat lightly drums in my ears, but much to my annoyance and relief, the noise doesn't happen again. I sigh, standing up from the couch. At the very least, I could try and grab a book maybe and do some reading. Anything that will help me with tap, tap, tap. I freeze in place. It's not in my head. I know I just heard that noise come from somewhere. I rush to the front windows and push them aside. Outside, all I can see is the well-lit walkway outside the house and my pale reflection staring back at me. I let the curtain fall, trying to swallow the concern that's making me want to empty my stomach. There's the faintest sound of hushed breath, and in the quiet of the night, it may as well be alarm bells. So this is it, I think. This is how I finally go mad in this world. A sharp creak immediately brings me back. It was the sound of a window opening. I sprint to Lila's room, cold sweat coming down my forehead as I push the door open. She's kneeling on her bed facing the window, curtains swept aside and frozen in place. She's opening up her bedroom window, and for a few seconds I see someone standing outside. The three of us freeze in place. For just a few seconds, we all pause, looking at one another like deer in headlights. One immediate thing became clear. That was not a child outside her window, but an adult man. Before I can consciously make a move, my instincts take over and I rush over to her window. The man dashes away before I can slam the window closed and lock it. Lila immediately starts crying, and I take her into my arm. Over the next few days, I quickly came to realize just how close I became to losing my daughter. The second week after we moved here, Lila made herself a new friend at the youth program. His name was Jay, and he was the groundskeeper for the college, at least that was his cover. Most days of the week, Jay would come visit the college and make his rounds around campus, always making sure to say hi to his little friends whenever they were out. He'd wait and sit on a bench just outside of view from where they went out to play tag and get their outside time. He'd offer them little snacks or gifts. He always had a uniform on, so he was a trusted adult. When I took Lila's phone, they've been exchanging messages for weeks now. He'd send her photos of animals, message her goodnight, say things to her that make my skin crawl just talking about it. The night he came to the house, he told her he'd be taking her to a special stargazing event. She wouldn't be allowed in if she told me. No adults allowed it. It was something just for the kids. And him. The police were able to find the identity of who Jay truly was. His real name was Thomas, and he wasn't a groundskeeper at the college. He was a failed farmer who lived on the outskirts of the state, never holding down a job for too long. They raided his home, but it was empty by the time that they got there. He had a barn where police found evidence of other kidnappings, but they were never able to find out what he did with the other children he took or how many children he ended up keeping there. He knew everything about our schedule. When we left, when we went home, what days of the week I had off. He knew about the divorce. Everything needed to steal my baby girl away from me. He would have succeeded. I would have lost Lila. I would have never seen her again if it weren't for what we saw on the trail. Safe to say, Lila's phone got taken away. She got a long lesson from both me and the police to never do what she did again. The scary thing is, I don't know if that'll be enough. Her school issues out laptops for its students to complete homework and take care of schoolwork. She eventually will need to have her own phone again, and social media is its own horror story. After that night, I didn't trust Lila's safety again in this house, so I asked for my ex-partner to take her until I could move away and find another job. I just can't shake this nagging feeling that things will never be the same again. If it weren't for those kids we encountered on the trail, Lila might not be alive today. I just have this feeling that something even worse is waiting for me with each passing day.